A large portion of this lecture is going to come from The Corporation of the Indian by H. Craig Minor. It provides quite a bit of detail as to what was happening upon the conclusion of the Civil War. So, as we know, Indian Territory was created. The 5 tribes lost half of their property. Primarily, they had to give up half the land holdings, specifically because of their participation with the Confederacy. As we noted in the last lecture, actually a majority of those tribes, except for the Choctaw, had fought for the Union. So why was so much land lost? Well, in 1866, Frisco Railroad lines, President of Frisco Rail, James Baker, admitted that he had written several territorial bills. Already, even before the ink is dry from the signing of the 1866 treaties by the 5 tribes, already there's a push by railroads to take Indian land. They wrote 50 territorial bills by 1876 alone. Cherokee Nation builds its capital in 1867. Bacon starts. Then in 1867, something else interesting happens, and it's known as the Credit Mobilier Scandal. Now, this is important because it's going to involve Senator Dawes of Massachusetts. Senator Dawes is the one that's going to write the Dawes Allotment Act. So was he acting on behalf of the railroads? I believe that could be demonstrated. The scandal involved building of Union Pacific Railroad, specifically Representative Ames of Massachusetts, who gave bribes for legislation favoring the railroads. It involved the Vice President, Speaker of the House, member of the House of Representatives James Garfield, who would become president later, Senator James Patterson of New Hampshire, Representative James Brooks of New York. Translation, they gave sweetheart deals to the railroads. Custer, in 1867, faces his second court-martial. Basically, his wife, according to this winner of the Pulitzer Prize, this specific biography, he thought his wife was having an affair. He led some troops. They end up, some of them, getting killed. And as a result, he does not respond to the attacks of the Indians and does not provide for his soldiers to receive medical attention. And so he is thus goes through court-martial. He's removed from rank. So as soon as his rank is reinstalled in 1868, the first thing that he does is he leads what's known as the Battle of Ouachita, where he kills 102 warriors, many women and children, and slaughters the 800 horses that belong to the peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho. In 1869, you start seeing another individual, Representative Sidney Clark. Now, the Osage, the Washaji, were given a large tract of land, almost as large as the reservation that belonged to the Cherokee, and in southern Kansas. However, already, because in 1862, with the passing of when we mentioned the passing of where they're allowed to take the Homestead Act, where they're allowed to get 160 acres, you start seeing people flooding into the Osage lands. There's several interesting educational documents dealing with the fact that Laura Ingalls Wilder, Little House on the Prairie, were there illegally squatting on Osage land, which is going to give us, already in June of 1868, when they're having debates in this, constituents to Representative Clark. One of them, JFK, says, "Knowing you to be a friend of the settler, I would call to your attention to a matter of the most vital interest to a large portion of your constituency. The settlers on the Osage Trust lands, a large portion of the settlements were made prior to the government survey." Translation: we deserve the land, not the railroads, because we've been squatting here longer. It's just open, blatant theft of Osage land. The railroads were wanting to get funds, specifically the Leavenworth, Lawrence, and Galveston. So you're seeing a former senator, Senator Lane, who is now the first president of that railroad. Another railroad is also trying to get access to tribal lands. So the Okmulgee Constitution, which was passed in 1871, you start seeing the tribes coming together and trying to create a territory Specifically, right after part of the signatures of the Treaty of 1866 was that the tribes would form a territory. Officers included members from Delawares, Creeks, Choctaws, Seminoles, Pawnees, Peorias, Eastern Shawnees, Absentee Shawnees, Black Bob Shawnees, Ottawas, Modocs, Sacanfox, Mexican Kickapoos, Wichitas, Wacos, Comanches, Caddos, Anadarkos, Delawares, Caws, Osages, Potawatomis, Cheyennes, Arapahoes, Wyandots, Quapaws, and Senecas. So almost all of the tribes that are now here, we were trying to create a general council and for the territory, at Okmulgee Indian Territory. 1872, you see this famous picture comes out called American Progress by Crowfoot. Notice the Indians are in the dark, and that this white angel is providing guidance for the westward expansion. In 1874, the Black Hills Gold Rush is announced by Custer. And so there was a question because specifically Professor Winchell will dispute that there was any gold there. And that if there was, that it was planted. And so one of the things that's about General Custer, who's invading the Black Hills that belonged to the Sioux, is that he had a gambling problem. So not only would he take his army to go on a bivouac to make sure his wife was not being unfaithful, but he had a gambling problem and he had debt, an increasing amount. So he wanted to open up the Black Hills. You'll see in the New York Times, Professor Winchell says there's no gold there, but it still sparks a gold rush in the Black Hills, and thus it's going to create that problem. Now, the 300,000 cattle that are stolen by Union military officers in 1865 becomes interesting. The reason being is because one of the people that is trying to invade Indian Territory is a man named Colonel Charles C. Carpenter. He had promoted the intrusion into the Black Hills of South Dakota and recruited a following of Kansas, Missouri settlers for a colonizing effort. He was a flamboyant imitator of General George Armstrong Custer. Carpenter, too, wore his hair in long curls and dressed in fringed buckskin. Now, this is important because you're starting to see the railroads employ people that are not legal. And so one of the people that's going to receive funding from railroads to invade Indian Territory is a man that had served in the Battle of Ouachita. His name was Colonel Payne. The reason this becomes important is because since he had served with the 19th Kansas Volunteers, it is obviously that he was involved with the multiple deaths that happened among the Cheyenne and Arapaho. And he obviously was also very anti-Indian, much as General Custer was.